Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Alderson. I haven't been listening earlier on, so I'm not sure if introductions were made. I think there's a little bio in the PDF that was sent out. But I'll just introduce myself a little bit. I've been working with families on the front line, directly in families' homes mostly, not in centers, for about 25 years, getting close to 30. And the heartbeat, I would say, the center of the work that I do is a huge amount of listening to parents. I sit and I listen and I give a space for parents to be able to talk and feel accepted and feel hopefully loved, and heard and listened to. And then we start a conversation about how we could create change right alongside acceptance. And this is what I was asked to talk about today. As parents and professionals who are in the conference today, there will be a duality that's in the conversations and that I see out in the field working with families and the children I work with. And the duality almost at times seems like a contradiction or an oxymoron, which is, on the one hand, we strive for acceptance. And I want to talk about that with you just a little bit in the next few minutes. So what does that kind of mean? So I want to just throw that out to you as you're listening right now. What does kind of that mean, acceptance to you? What would that mean to accept your situation or accept your child, accept yourself? And on the other hand, many of you will be, and I'm certainly hired to help inspire and promote change and growth and development, both in parents and caregivers and teachers. I do a lot of training of professionals, and in children and young adults as well. So how does that coexist? On the one hand, we're trying to accept what is, and on the other hand, we're going for change as well. I want to skip to sort of the last point I'd like to make today right up front and suggest to you that they actually could be incredibly complementary, so that change is maybe best done through acceptance, so that when we're in an accepting place, that we could get to change. So just trying to skip here. It's not letting me skip, guys. Sorry. I wonder if it's the system.
It might work.
What's that?
If you click the slide.
Click on the slide. Oh, there. Yep, you got it. Well done. Thank you. So I'd like to just start with a story. As I say, over the last many years, couple decades, working with families directly, for me, what's real about the work that I do isn't theory and stuff, but just real people. So here's a picture. If you take a look carefully, I'm going to walk you through it for a moment. This is a mom, and this mom had a little boy, and this little boy had several different diagnoses, not CDKL5, but on the autism spectrum, also highly sensory, hyper sensitive, and I'll describe that in a minute. Also had some hearing challenges, and at this time we weren't sure about a vision challenge, but later on he was diagnosed with some myopathy in his eyes. So lots of different issues going on for this little guy. And when I showed up on the scene, one of the first conversations I had with the mom was where she teared up and began to cry very quickly. When I asked her a question, I said, "What's the saddest thing for you about your situation?" Now, that might sound like a crazy, maybe insensitive question to ask, but we'll get to why I would ask a question like that in a minute. So she answered it, and I think she felt safe and okay. And she said, "One of the saddest things for me is I can't have affection with my child in the way I'd like to, because I just can't. He won't come over, won't sit in my lap. She said, I've never had a kiss from my son ever." And she sort of played a bit of a cat and mouse with him over the years. He's very young, as you can see, but she'd sort of, try and scoop him up, and he'd wiggle away and just not want any kind of affection, any kind of touch, any kind of physical touch. So we dialogued, the mom and I, and over a number of sessions, got to a place where she felt she could begin to accept that she wasn't receiving affection, able to have it in the ways that she imagined that she wanted it. And she started to describe having a bit more comfort, a bit more ease around accepting this, that this might be the way it is. She didn't give up, but she felt more comfortable. And it was in that session that she expressed more comfort and ease that I said, "Hey, would you like to try a new experiment?" She said, "Sure." I said, "I'd like to invite you to go to the center of the room, the playroom, and just sit down. And in your comfort of accepting that you may never get a hug in the way you want or a kiss in the way you want, just sit and breathe. Don't chase them. Don't expect anything, but just be comfortable." So she did that. And I said, "Hey, if you started to hope for a little kiss, because that's the one thing you really wanted, what would your posture be? What would your body do? You're comfortable, you're feeling relaxed, but you want a little kiss. What would you do?" And she leaned forward exactly like you see in this picture. And I was to the side, so I was coaching. And I said, "Okay, just pause and just stay like that and just be really still and comfortable." And it wasn't long after that, her little son sort of circled around her, a bit like a hawk, kind of checking it out. We think that he was probably checking out to see if he was going to be grabbed at any moment for a hug. But she just stood still. And in this picture, we took a series of pictures as this happened, but I grabbed this picture to share with you today. This is where he's coming over to her and he's in total control. He's controlling this entire situation. She's still. So she's not leaning forward in this moment. She's completely frozen and still, but she's feeling comfortable. And he leans in and he indeed gives her a kiss for the first time. I actually get choked up as I say this because I remember the moment. It was so tender and beautiful. It was a tiny, tiny, tiny little kiss. And if you see in the picture closely, you'll see his right hand and his left hand were out to the side. He's not reaching out to touch or grab her because he was so hypersensitive tactilely. So he just, but the point here is that he wanted that kiss. He just needed to know how to do it in a safe way and in a controlled way. That's story number one. I'm going to share a second story with you quickly. Oh man, there we go. Some of you may know a U.S. senator, a congresswoman who was in the House of Representatives, and in 2011, there was an assassination attempt. Now, Gabby Giffords was one of the leading top female politicians in the United States at the time. She was sort of pegged to potentially be a front runner for the presidency. Incredibly articulate, smart, bright woman. And on this January 2011 day, she was doing a rally and a man pulled out a gun and shot her within about a foot range, right just above her eye, left eye, about an inch above. It tore right through her brain, out the back of her skull, and they thought she was to be left dead. Some of you may know her story. She was in a coma for over a week, and as she began to wake up from that coma, they knew that she had lost all of her speech. She had lost all of her motor control. She only had about 50% of her vision. She had to have a trach in her throat to breathe because she didn't have that motor control. So for all intents and purposes, a significant part of her brain, and in particular Broca's area where the language center is, was severely damaged. Her prognosis was she would be in a vegetation state for the rest of her life if she lived. She had many brain surgeries, was on a variety of medications to control a variety of things that were going on. Skip to 11 years from that time to this year. And Gabby Giffords has worked with a speech therapist and an OT for all of this time. And she's written a number of articles. There's been a number of articles written about her as well. And if you read these, there's a theme that stands out, and that's that Gabby Giffords and her OT and SLP adopted a particular attitude. And I want to just tell you just a little quick anecdote that highlights it. her speech therapist, who's now really quite known, I think she's been on like the Oprah Winfrey show and all these different morning shows, is Gabby Giffords, speech therapist, because Gabby Gifford is now saying some words and some sentences. So she's come a long way. But the speech therapist, when asked, like, how did you do it and what do you do? And this is remarkable. She says, it's all about being relaxed and comfortable. It's all about finding an accepting place. Because anytime that Gabby Giffords would push and force and try and find the words, it would never happen. And so the speech therapist would coach her and say, hey, don't try and say it, just relax, kind of get in the groove, and she would start to find her words. So that's the second story I wanted to tell you. In my program, there's 4 principles, and I wanted to share just 2 of them with you today that we work on. And one is attitude impacts behavior. And this is a scientific fact, and that is your emotions, your emotional state. If you're feeling fear, there's a biological effect that happens on your physiology. Now you'll already know that. You'll already know that when you're feeling fear, you might start to perspire. I remember being sort of fearful and in public speaking years and years ago, and I certainly sweat a lot at the time, embarrassingly. So there was a physiological effect from my fear. And that's true when you're excited and waiting for someone to come in on a surprise party, and you might feel butterflies. There was a book written by a woman named Candace Pert, a PhD researcher on the neurochemicals. And what she studied, the book is called Molecules of Emotion. And she was one of the first scientists many decades ago that said, hey, our emotions actually have a neurochemical signature. So love has this much dopamine and this much cortisone and these kinds of things that cascade through the brain. And fear would look like this, and anticipation looks like this. And she tried to sort of categorize that. And what it told us is that our attitude impacts directly our behavior. Now, why is this important? Because the 2 stories I just told you about are about an attitude that the people involved, both the therapist and the person doing the change work, whether it's the mother or the child, the person with an injury, brain injury, they adopted a certain attitudinal perspective and it affected their behavior. So in the first instance, the mother was more relaxed, and we believe that the child could visually see that, not sense it like a psychic sense, but could see that the mother was relaxed and not going to grab him. So he felt more comfortable to come over. And in Gabby Giffords' case, somehow when she was more also relaxed and accepting of what was happening, she was able to find the words in her brain. So I want to invite all of you parents and even professionals listening to think about the degree to which you consider your attitude and what you're feeling when you're with your child or your young adult with CDKL5, what your feelings about that situation are and how they might impact your behavior in that moment. When you're feeding your child, if you're feeling frustrated, how does that impact the way that the fork goes towards your child as opposed to when you're relaxed? So the professionals who I work with, we focus a lot on how we're feeling first and what we do second, if that makes sense. And a third story comes from the CDKL5 Canada magazine. And I hope it's okay. I didn't ask for permission from this, but I felt it was sort of in the public domain. But there was a story in the May 2019 issue of Rare Reality. And if you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to read it. It's just a mother's almost blog post article. And it's a spotlight on Bryn, who's a young girl. And what I did in this article is it just pulled out some sentences to share with you. CDKL5, a little girl. And you'll read here, it says she can't sit, she can't stand, she can't walk, and she can't talk. But what's their perspective attitudinally? They say, what she can't say in words, she says with her eyes. And the mother says, I marvel at how easily we can communicate despite her silence. Now, this is just one family's experience, and it's not to be held out as a model and making a different point about attitude. And then she says her brother and sister get so excited when she responds to their chatter or expresses her happiness. And finally, in the article, she says, we celebrate the little things, and her challenges make her accomplishments so much sweeter. We look for the silver lining in life and have discovered that they are out there, the silver linings. You just have to look for them. We continue to hope. So I underlined marvel and excited and celebrate and hope because I think that they're examples of a particular attitudinal posture. And for some people, that attitudinal posture of hope, celebration, and excitement may come easily. But for most of us, we work at it. And it needs to be conscious and something that we make a decision about and we try and feel. I believe for this family, although I've never met them and I've never met Brent, though I'd very much like to, I would guess that the brother and the sister and the mom and dad, that their behavior reflects the marvel, the excitement, the celebration, and the hope in the way that they treat her, their daughter. So this brings us to the first word that I was going to talk about with you today: acceptance, dignity, and privacy. So just very quickly, I know I don't have a huge amount of time, but with acceptance. And I want to just suggest this is a little bit of theory. Hopefully it's helpful for you. I think that there's two different ways you could think about acceptance. And traditionally in our society, I think we sort of frame acceptance out as sort of a passive thing, passive experience. Like the neighbors are making a ton of noise in the backyard. They do every summer. And we've been here for 3 years. We've asked them to turn it down. We've tried to be nice. We've tried to not be nice. They keep making noise. So I guess I just got to accept it, right? That's how it's sort of framed. I guess we just kind of got to live with it, got to accept it. There's a sense of kind of giving up a little bit, a sense of losing agency. That's one way you could think about it. The way that we frame it out in the IMTI program is more of an active and empowering version. And it has specifically to do with how you're feeling and not so much about what you might or might not do about it. So in the case of the neighbor making a ton of noise during the summer, we would observe that we're not feeling good. We're a bit angry and frustrated, maybe judgmental. And we would know that that attitudinal perspective would not make us effective at communicating with the neighbor or at solving problems or at finding creative ways to enjoy your summer. We would just be frustrated and a bit pissed off. So we would start in terms of acceptance with simply shifting how we feel about the situation, but not that we would give up hope or stop trying to change it. So we'd say, I'm going to decide to no longer feel bad about this. I'm going to decide to no longer feel grumpy or mad or frustrated. And now I'm going to go about doing everything I can to try and have them be a bit more quieter. So it's an empowered active acceptance, and it's more to do with letting go of judgments rather than giving up. So how would this apply for you? How would this apply in working with a child or helping your family or being a parent? Well, I invite parents to share what their biggest fears are, but also their judgments, by the way, of themselves as well. Many of us do feel that maybe we're not good enough or we could be doing more. And so we start there and say, hey, how could we shift that judgment of yourself? How could you shift a judgment of the teacher at school who you like, but you don't think they're doing their best job? How could you shift your judgment of your husband who you desperately want to be supportive and want to be on board, but he's not quite there? And you feel let down and there's a judgment. And you know that that very judgment, that attitude is actually sort of separating you more and more. So acceptance is about not giving up that you're going to stop trying, but how you're feeling about the situation. And when we choose love as opposed to fear, and when we choose joy and celebration and excitement, we find, our team finds that we're now able to go about change with a hope and a renewed kind of energy. And we become these sort of ferocious and fierce goer afters of change in very playful ways. I want to just move on to dignity. I laughed when I saw this picture. I actually was contemplating picking a cat or a dog picture, and the way that people dress up their dogs and cats. And I don't know about you, I've seen some walking downtown in Toronto where I sort of think if I was that cat or dog, I'd certainly be a bit embarrassed and wonder if I had any dignity. But on a serious note, what do we consider in working with the families and the children we work with is almost all of the children who I work with are either nonverbal or aren't able to express what they want or what they need or what would be more comfortable for them or what's going on in their bodies. And so we train our staff and therapists to be deeply, deeply, deeply empathic and able to take the perspective as much as possible of the person they're working with in order to maintain their dignity. And we find that when we do this, that we gain trust, we gain rapport, and a lot more cooperation to the extent that the person is able to indicate even little things or cooperate with us by extending to them more dignity. So I wanted just to give you very quickly just a couple of quick examples that you could maybe think about. And you might be doing all of these already, or there might be one or two that you could think about a bit more. So the first one is, how do you promote agency for the child or the young adult, the sibling you're taking care of? And that is, we communicate directly to them what's going to happen next to them. So if we're about to get in a car and put a seatbelt on, I'm going to say that to them, even if we've done it 1,000 times already. I'm not going to say it in a condescending way as if they don't know what's happening, but I'll say, hey, we're going to get in the car and I'm going to put on your seatbelt. So we're reminding the brain and the senses of what's going to happen to their body, and that gives them more dignity about it. For example, hey, I'm going to go in the bathroom and get it ready for a bath for you, and then I'm going to come back and help you come over to the bath and help you get in the bathtub. So we're just letting them know what's coming up ahead of time. Some of you might be used to picture schedules, visual schedules. This is a little bit different than that. This is just one human telling another human, this is what I'm going to be doing with you or to you or for you, not just the schedule. Here's the second thing, time. We then give lots and lots of time, more time than you might think, for processing and for the person to willingly participate. Again, many children not able to, they're not ambulatory, can't move their arms and legs, can't talk. So you might say, Jonathan, what are you talking about? Participate. But I will tell you from working with hundreds and hundreds of children that when we give time for them to process what we've said to them, we often see little indications of participation. I'll give you a quick example. I said to a child, I'm going to put on your sock. And then I waited and I looked and I smiled and I looked at the foot that I was going to do that with. And I moved my hand over to the child's heel. And I took the heel. The child wasn't able to move much at all. And as I went to put the sock on the toes, by my view, became more erect, that there was some extension of the end of the toes, just a tiny little bit. And I believe the child was participating with me in that moment. And I gave some time to process and for the participation to happen. And with our teams, when we do that repeatedly over and over and over, then that individual gets a chance to exercise their participation and it becomes more frequent and stronger as a signal. Going to the next one is respect. We have a patent rule. I have a rule. I will not talk about a child if they're in the same room or within earshot if I'm not including them in the conversation. And I want to encourage all of you parents just to think of the times that you might have picked that child up from a center or some a session or even a grandparent, and they're there in the chair or in a pram or in your arms, and you talk about them like, oh, how was his day? And the grandmother says, oh, he was unsettled today. And you say, oh yeah, he was like that this morning too. He's right in your arms. And we believe that a way to extend a bit more dignity and inclusion is to speak not in a third or second person, but to be inclusive of that child in that moment. And if that's not possible, because you got to get into like, so how was it and how did it go? Maybe do that on the phone a little bit later or in a text message a little bit later. So that's something we feel very strongly about. And then the last two things I have on this screen, as I'm just aware of time and moving through very quickly. Independence is something that all parents, no one argues about that. We all want more independence for our children and the people we work with. And in this case, similar to the agency and the time, we always ask and tell before we physically touch. And I think as a caregiver, especially one who's a daily caregiver, like a mom or a dad or a nanny or a grandmother or a sibling, it's very, very easy just to get into routines of putting on socks and shoes and not asking, not saying, hey, I'm going to grab your foot right now and put on your sock. So always ask and tell before. I'm going to pull down your pants so we can, clean you up and change your diapers now. I would say that to a 2-year-old, to a 3-year-old. I'd let them know, I'd communicate what I'm going to do. And we believe that that starts to create an independence of that person. Why? Because in the communication itself, I'm saying, I'm separate from you and I'm going to do something to your body. So I need to communicate to you, as opposed to just, you're the child I carry around and I feed and I do things to, so I don't have to communicate so much to you, if that makes sense. So all of these things set us up for a different attitude and relationship to the person we're working with. And then the last one here, it says with versus to or for. And what we mean by that on our team is we behave with a child rather than to them or for them. So we wouldn't hold a child's hand as in we're holding it, but we would hold with them. So I put a little thing here. I don't know if you can see on the screen. It says palm up and thumb away. And so in our program, if we're going to hold a child's hand, we actually start with our palm up. Instead of grabbing a hand like this, typically you'd grab over and your thumb would lock and you would hold the child's hand. What we do is we offer our hand for those who can move their hand into ours. And for those who can't, we still scoop from underneath and we try not to put our thumb lock on too tight or too much. And the reason we do that, I'll tell you why, it's because we find that when we don't lock our thumb too hard on the top, children who can, even a tiny bit, they tend to grasp a bit more. In other words, if we're holding on to them, they tend not to have the grasper reflex as strong because they don't need to because we're holding on so tight. And when we don't hold on so tight, we go to move and we say, hey, let's go. We'll feel a little grasp as we do the lift a little bit. And we start to have them hold our hand and they engage and they get agency. So I'm happy to talk more about those things, but just some examples. And the last word that I was asked to present about and talk about when we're thinking about relationships with the people we're caring for is privacy. And this is really quite just a practical thing. And it's all related to what we've been talking about with dignity. But the two main points that we talk about are balance between support and privacy. So obviously when I am supporting someone, let's say in the bathroom, I have to be there to support them. But there's a balance there also with respecting their privacy and dignity. So what does that look like? Well, I want to make sure that when it's appropriate and I can professionally, and certainly as a parent you can, is that I close the door. So if I am in there helping them, that the door would be closed or at least almost always entirely closed, right? As opposed to just, we can leave it open. Changing diapers. It's very easy to do it in the living room in front of people, especially siblings walking around. Our policy will always go into the bathroom because, by the way, that makes a link to this is what happens is the poop and the diapers is in a bathroom. But that aside, for sort of toilet training purposes, it's just there's more privacy, right? To go into a room rather than doing it in sort of a public place, as an example. And I'd suggest that there even needs to be a balance between inclusion in school, inclusion in different activities, and privacy. So a quick example would be if medications are given in front of peers. Oh, it's time for this. That's not a bad thing, but just to think about it, what's the peer perception if they see this child having these medications on a frequent time? Now, on the one hand, you want inclusion. You want the children to see that and know that that's part of your child, and that should be normalized. It should be brought into an inclusion model. But on the other side, what's the perception? And so that's why I wrote here. There's a balance between inclusion, push for inclusion, and also kind of privacy as well, right? So I think how we play this out in our program is we have discussions, and that's why I put here there needs to be sort of discussion and planning around the balance between support and privacy, and also between inclusion and privacy. And they're just discussions that I often facilitate and we have. So I'm just going to end. I felt like I sort of speeded through this. I wanted to leave just maybe even 5 minutes or so for Q&A. With this picture that I started with in the first slide. And this picture is not one that I took, but it speaks a lot to what we do in our program and what we talked about. Palm up, thumb to the side. Now this little baby is not grasping the hand, of course, but it has that. But it also, I think, metaphorically or symbolically has a sense that I'm there to support you, but not to move you or do things to you. So my love is there to support you and lift you and encourage you, but not to do it to you or for you or against you or without telling you. So starting with acceptance as an attitude, if we believe that your attitude impacts your behavior, then you'd ask yourself, what kind of attitude would I adopt that would lead to the kind of behaviors that would be most useful in order for me to empower and teach and educate and support change? And then thinking as you go through that relationship and process over often many, many years, if not decades, how do I maintain the dignity and privacy of this person who doesn't have the same agency and communication that the rest of us have? So hopefully this has been interesting and got you thinking a little bit. I think I'm going to open the Q&A and the chat and maybe take some questions. Here's one. I'll read it out if that's okay. When you get to a place of acceptance and able to see possibilities, how do you reach out to other professionals who service your child who are seeing the diagnosis instead of possibilities? Great question. I'm guessing that almost 100% of parents would nod at that and say, I get it. Listen, professionals, hopefully working with someone with a good heart, they're there for the right reasons and intentions. I think anyone that I work with in my field go in it for the right reasons. But that doesn't mean that we've been trained about how to let go of our judgments. It doesn't mean if we have a good heart and we're a good person and we work hard that we have a sense of how to manage and control and design our attitude. So it's a really good question. And I would say two things just really quickly. The first is when you're interviewing programs, when you're interviewing therapists, when you're interviewing professionals, trying to check out, are we going to work with this person or not? Why not talk about attitude a little bit? Bring that into the conversation. If that's a variable that's important to you, how they feel about the diagnosis, I would start off with a question. Hey, before you go any further, I'd just like to ask you a little bit, what are your thoughts on CDKL5 and the children and their prognosis? And they might kind of look at you and say, what are my thoughts? What do you mean? And you might say, well, I'd just be interested, sort of, what are your feelings around that? And what's your sort of level of hope? And you can sort of probe it in different ways, but you're sort of trying to interview them a little bit on some of the beliefs they have, some of their judgments, maybe some of their preconceived notions. And so that would be my first suggestion, is interview for an attitude as much as for their professional credentials and their behavior, right? Could probably apply that to all of our relationships too. If we went back many years before we chose our spouse or our girlfriend or boyfriend, they might have done the right behaviors at the time, but what about the kind of attitude? And you discover that over the years. The second thing, just really quickly, I'd say is bring the idea of acceptance, hope, and letting go of judgments into your team meetings on an ongoing basis. So in my team meetings, I have team meetings every single day with different teams, actually right across Canada. I'm working with a family in Ireland right now. And now I get to lead, so I can kind of shape it as I like. But in my agenda, I say to my team, hey guys, how are you feeling about little Billy today? And then they start talking about examples. Well, he was at school and he didn't eat his lunch, and then he, the snack we gave him, he threw it up. And I say, okay, how are you feeling when he threw it up? Like, what were you feeling? Frustrated, comfortable? What? And I probe attitude all the time. It doesn't make sense to me to get to behavior if we haven't talked about attitude. Why? Because attitude impacts behavior. So if I tell someone what they should do with my child and I didn't address how they should feel about it, then I'm missing a whole piece that we know scientifically, neurologically, physiologically has an impact on. Does that make sense? It's like saying to someone, I'll teach you how to drive, but I won't deal with your rage. So, right? Okay. Let me go to the second question. If you get the word degenerative disease in terms of not providing, if you get the word degenerative disease in terms of not providing services, what do you say to parents who has no support or respite? How do you recharge? Right. Yeah. Okay. I think where I start with supporting a parent who is already burned out or getting close to burnout, or maybe has been burned out a couple of times and they try and find their ways to recharge, is, I might sound like a broken record, but I start with feelings. And I start with feelings, not to say, hey, be positive and be hopeful. That's not my shtick. My shtick is, let's just be aware, more aware of the thoughts we have and the feelings. Why? Because it's true that one of the energy drains for all of us is what we think about all day long and how we feel. So if I think about the future and I'm scared of the future, which makes sense, it's reasonable that you're thinking about what's going to happen to my child when he's 27 or 37. It's going to happen when I'm not around. And you stay up at night and you stare at the ceiling and you think about that. And tell me if that doesn't drain you the most. It's not really having to make soup at lunch and drive to school at 9 in the morning. That's not, that's physically tiring a bit, but you can recharge from that. But it's what's happening up in here all day long and all night that really is draining. And so in terms of, if you don't have support in the way you'd like, and you don't have the respite that would help you to physically recharge, one place to start is to start to get some kind of professional support, help, or if it's from YouTube, or if it's from a Tony Robbins video, or if it's from someone that can speak a language that you're understanding and words that you're understanding, that inspires you and moves you to shift some of your thought patterns. That might sound simplistic, and I'm not in any way trying to take away from the daily ins and outs of the intensity of taking care of a child with intensive special needs. It's exhausting, especially without respite. What I'm trying to offer you is something that's free and available as a resource for you immediately, that you don't have to get on a waiting list for, and you don't have to have $1 or a loonie or a toonie for. And that's the thoughts that are in your head and the feelings that you're feeling. So it's a place to start. Thank you for those questions.